Sometimes the universe plays tricks so twisted, so impossible to explain, that they make you question everything you thought you knew about reality. This is the story of Sarah Chen, a 26-year-old Uber driver from Portland, who picked up a passenger on a rainy Thursday night. A passenger she had never met before, a passenger whose face had been haunting her dreams for over 3 years. The setup: Sarah had been driving for Uber for 2 years. Night shifts paid better, and she needed every dollar to pay off her student loans. She knew the city like the back of her hand. Every shortcut, every dead-end street, every area to avoid after midnight. But she had never experienced anything like what happened on October 15th, 2023. It started like any other night. Rain drumming against her windshield, the radio playing. Soft jazz, her phone lighting up with ride requests every few minutes. Then at 11:47 p.m., she got a pickup request from downtown. The passenger's name was David Martinez. The destination was an address she didn't recognize, about 20 minutes away in the hills. Sarah accepted the ride and drove to the pickup location. A figure stood under a dim streetlight, holding a small suitcase. As she pulled closer, her heart stopped. The man walking toward her car was identical to someone she had seen countless times before, not in person, in her dreams. The recognition. For 3 years, Sarah had been having the same recurring dream. She would find herself in an old library, surrounded by dusty books and flickering candles. And there, reading by a window, would be a man with dark curly hair, sharp jawline, and eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets. In these dreams, they would talk for hours, about books, about life, about dreams within dreams. He felt more real than most people she knew in waking life. Sometimes she would wake up crying, missing conversations that had never actually happened. She had sketched his face dozens of times, tried to convince herself he was just a creation of her subconscious mind, a lonely woman's imaginary companion. But now he was standing in front of her car, very real, very much alive. David opened the passenger door and slid into the front seat. His voice was exactly as she remembered from her dreams, soft with a slight accent she couldn't place. "Thank you for picking me up so late," he said, shaking raindrops from his jacket. "I know it's not the safest time to be out." Sarah's hands trembled on the steering wheel. She managed to nod and started driving, but her mind was racing. This was impossible. People don't just step out of dreams into reality. The first conversation. "You seem nervous," David observed as they navigated through the empty streets. "First night driving?" "No, I've been doing this for a while," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. You look familiar." David turned to study her face in the dim light from the dashboard. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Confusion? She couldn't tell. "That's strange," he said slowly. "I was just thinking the same thing about you." Sarah nearly swerved into the other lane. She pulled herself together, focusing on the road ahead. But every few seconds, she would glance at David through the rearview mirror, confirming that he was really there. "Where are you heading tonight?" she asked, trying to make normal conversation while her world tilted on its axis. "I'm not entirely sure," David replied, which was an odd answer for someone who had requested a specific destination. "I've been traveling for a long time. Sometimes I feel like I'm looking for something, but I can't remember what." The words sent chills down Sarah's spine. In her dreams, he had said almost the exact same thing. The growing mystery as they drove deeper into the hills, away from the city lights, the atmosphere in the car grew heavier. David stared out the window at the passing trees, lost in thought. "Do you ever have dreams that feel more real than your actual life?" he asked suddenly. Sarah's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "Dreams where you live entire experiences, where you have conversations with people you've never met, but somehow know, better than your own family. Dreams so vivid that when you wake up, you feel like you've lost something precious. Sarah pulled over to the side of the road. Her hands were shaking too badly to keep driving safely. She turned to look at David directly. "For 3 years," she whispered, "I've been dreaming about a man who looks exactly like you. We would meet in an old library. We would talk about books, about philosophy, about the nature of dreams. And every morning, I would wake up feeling like I had lost my closest friend." David's face went pale. He stared at her for a long moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. "For 3 years," he said, his voice barely audible, "I've been dreaming about a woman with long black hair and kind eyes, someone who understood me completely, someone who felt like home." He opened the notebook and showed her page after page of sketches. "Someone who looks exactly like you." Part 1. Cliffhanger. The sketches were perfect, every detail of Sarah's face captured with impossible accuracy. Her eyes, her smile, even a small scar on her chin from a childhood accident. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. At the bottom of each sketch was a date, and every single date corresponded exactly to the nights when Sarah had dreamed about the library, about the mysterious man who had now materialized in her passenger seat. As Sarah stared at the drawings of herself, created by a stranger who claimed to have been dreaming about her for years, one terrifying question echoed in her mind. If they had been sharing the same dreams, what else might they be sharing? And why had they finally found each other in the real world? End of Part 1. Character count, 7,987. Sarah and David sat in stunned silence, the notebook open between them like evidence of an impossible crime. The rain had stopped, but neither of them noticed. The world outside the car seemed to fade away, as they grappled with a reality that defied every law of logic they knew. "This can't be happening," Sarah whispered, tracing her finger over one of the sketches. "People don't share dreams. It's not scientifically possible." David closed the notebook slowly. "I've told myself the same thing for 3 years. I've seen doctors, therapists, sleep specialists. They all said the same thing. Vivid dreams, nothing more. But deep down, I always knew there was something different about those dreams." Different how? They had continuity. Each dream picked up where the last one left off. We would reference conversations from previous nights. You would remember books I had recommended, jokes I had made. It was like living a parallel life. Sarah's mind raced back through her own dream experiences. David was right. The dreams hadn't been random or disconnected. They had built upon each other, creating an entire relationship that existed only in sleep. "In the dreams, what did we talk about the most?" she asked, testing him. "Books. Always. Books. You loved mystery novels, especially anything involving parallel realities or unexplained phenomena. You said you felt like you were living in one of those stories, but you didn't know if you were the detective or the mystery itself." Sarah's blood ran cold. Those were her exact words, spoken in dreams she thought were private. The investigation begins. "We need to understand what's happening to us," David said, his voice gaining strength. "This isn't a coincidence. There has to be a reason why we've been connected through dreams, and why we finally met in person tonight." "Where were you before I picked you up?" Sarah asked. "I mean, where do you live? How did you end up requesting a ride at that specific location?" David's expression grew troubled. "That's the strange part. I don't remember choosing that pickup spot. I was staying at a hotel downtown, but when I woke up tonight, I was standing on that street corner with my suitcase. I had my phone in my hand with your ride already requested." "You don't remember leaving your hotel?" "I remember lying down to sleep around 9 p.m. The next thing I knew, I was standing in the rain at 11:47, watching your car approach. 3 hours just disappeared." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "David, I need to tell you something," I wasn't supposed to be driving tonight. I had plans to stay home and catch up on work. But around 11:30, I felt this overwhelming urge to go out and drive, like something was calling me to get in my car and start accepting rides. They stared at each other, both beginning to understand that whatever force had connected them in dreams was now manipulating their waking lives. The pattern emerges. David opened his notebook again, flipping through pages of sketches and notes. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a series of dates written in the margins. "I've been tracking the dreams for months. They don't happen randomly. There's a pattern." Sarah leaned closer to examine his careful records. The dates were clustered in specific sequences. 3 dreams in a row, then a week of silence. 5 dreams, then 2 weeks of nothing. 7 dreams, then a month gap. "The gaps have been getting longer," David explained. "And when the dreams do happen, they've been more intense, more real. In the last few dreams, I could smell the books in the library. I could feel the texture of the old wooden table where we would sit." "I noticed that too," Sarah admitted. "In recent dreams, I could taste the tea we would drink. I could feel the warmth of the fireplace. It was getting harder to tell where the dream ended and reality began." David flipped to the last page of his notebook. "The final dream I had was 5 days ago. In it, you told me that we were running out of time. You said that the dreams were becoming too real, too powerful, and that something was going to happen to bring us together in the waking world." Sarah's heart stopped. She remembered that dream vividly. She had felt an urgency, a sense that their time in the dream library was coming to an end. "What did I say would happen when we met in real life?" she asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. "You said that meeting in person would either set us free from whatever force was connecting us or trap us in it forever." The destination. Revealed Sarah looked at the GPS on her phone. They were still 20 minutes away from the destination David had entered. But now she wondered if he had actually chosen that address, or if something else had guided him there. "David, where does this address lead to? Do you know what's at that location?" He shook his head. "I've never been there before. I don't even remember entering the address, but—" He paused, looking uncertain. "I've been having flashes of images all day. An old house, Victorian architecture, lots of windows, and books, so many books." Sarah's hands began to tremble again. "That sounds exactly like the library from our dreams. But the library in the dreams wasn't a house. It was inside some kind of institution. A university, maybe, or a research facility." "What if they're the same place?" David asked quietly. "What if the library we've been visiting in our dreams is a real location, and we're being drawn there?" The possibility hung between them like a loaded gun. If the dream library was real, if they were about to walk into the actual place where their impossible connection had begun, what would they find there? More importantly, what would find them? The phone call as they resumed driving toward the mysterious destination. David's phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. "I don't recognize the number," he said. "Answer it," Sarah urged, though something in her gut told her she didn't want to hear this conversation. David accepted the call and put it on speaker. The voice that came through was elderly, female, and carried an accent that seemed to shift between different regions. "David Martinez," the voice said. "You're earlier than expected." "Who is this?" David asked. "How did you get this number?" "You know who I am, dear boy. We've been corresponding for quite some time now. And Sarah Chen is with you, isn't she? I can sense her presence." Sarah felt ice water flow through her veins. "How do you know my name?" "Oh, my dear girl. I've known both of you for much longer than you might imagine. You're almost at the house now. When you arrive, please come to the front door. It will be unlocked. We have so much to discuss." "We're not going anywhere until you tell us who you are and what you want," Sarah said, trying to sound braver than she felt. The old woman chuckled, a sound that was both warm and deeply unsettling. What I want is to give you answers. You've been searching for the truth behind your shared dreams, haven't you? You want to know why you've been connected, why you've finally been brought together tonight. You're behind this? David asked. Behind it? Oh no, dear boy. I'm simply the caretaker. The dreams, the connection between you two, that's something far older and more powerful than anything I could create. But I am the one who's been waiting for you to find your way home. The line went dead. The final approach Sarah and David drove. The last few miles in heavy silence. The road had become narrower, winding through dense forest that seemed to swallow their headlights. No other cars, no houses, just trees pressing in on both sides, like they were being swallowed by the darkness. Then, they saw it. A Victorian mansion stood at the end of a long driveway, every window glowing with warm yellow light. It was exactly as David had described. Tall, imposing, covered in intricate woodwork that cast strange shadows in the illumination. But what made Sarah's breath catch was the architectural detail she could see even from a distance. The building looked exactly like the library from their dreams, only expanded into a full house. We don't have to go in, David said quietly. We could turn around right now, go back to the city. Pretend none of this ever happened. Sarah considered it for a moment. The rational part of her mind screamed that they should run. Nothing good could come from walking into that house, from meeting the woman who somehow knew about their dreams. But the other part of her, the part that had been searching for answers for 3 years, knew that turning back wasn't really an option. If we don't find out the truth tonight, she said, we'll spend the rest of our lives wondering. And the dreams, what if they get stronger? What if whatever's connecting us doesn't let us go? David nodded slowly. Together then? Together. As Sarah parked the car and they walked toward the front door of the mysterious mansion, neither of them noticed the figure watching from an upstairs window. A figure that had been waiting decades for this moment. The door swung open before they could knock, revealing a hallway lined with books that stretched back into shadows. And from somewhere, deep within the house, came the sound of a fire crackling in a hearth, exactly like the one from their dreams. The moment Sarah and David stepped through the doorway, the temperature dropped noticeably. The hallway stretched before them, lined with towering bookshelves that seemed to reach impossibly high ceilings. The books were old, their leather spines cracked and faded, and they smelled of vanilla and dust. It was exactly like their dreams, but wrong somehow. Too real, too present. "Welcome home," came the voice from the phone call. An elderly woman emerged from the shadows at the far end of the hall. She was smaller than her voice had suggested, probably in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see straight through them. "I am Dr. Eleanor Whitmore," she said, approaching with a cane that clicked against the hardwood floor. "And you two have been my life's work for longer than you might imagine." "Your life's work?" Sarah asked, instinctively moving closer to David. "The study of shared consciousness across the dream state. You see, what's been happening to you isn't unique. There have been others. Pairs of people, sometimes groups, who become connected through dreams. But most pairs only last a few weeks before the connection fades." Dr. Whitmore gestured for them to follow her deeper into the house. "You two, however, have maintained your connection for 3 years. That's unprecedented. That's what makes you so valuable." "Valuable for what?" David demanded. Instead of answering, Dr. Whitmore led them into a large study. The walls were covered with photographs, documents, and what looked like medical charts. But what drew their attention immediately were the dozens of sketches pinned to one wall. Sketches that looked exactly like the ones in David's notebook. "These are from other subjects," Dr. Whitmore explained, noticing their stares. "Other pairs who found each other through shared dreams. Notice anything familiar?" Sarah examined the sketches more closely. Different faces, different people, but the artistic style was identical to David's drawings. The same precise lines, the same attention to detail, even the same type of paper. They all drew the same way, she whispered. Exactly. And they all kept detailed records of their dreams, just like David has been doing. They all felt compelled to document their experiences, though none of them understood why. David pulled out his notebook and compared it to the other records, and on display. The handwriting was different, but the format was identical. Dates, times, detailed descriptions of dream conversations, sketches of their dream partners. "How many pairs have there been?" he asked. 17 confirmed cases over the past 40 years. You're number 18. What happened to the others? Sarah asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Dr. Whitmore's expression grew somber. Some connections simply faded after a few encounters in the real world. The couples would meet, realize they had been sharing dreams, and then the dreams would stop. They would go back to their normal lives. And the others? The others chose to stay connected. They discovered that meeting in person didn't end their shared dreaming. Instead, it evolved into something more. They could share consciousness while awake, read each other's thoughts, experience each other's memories. Sarah felt her stomach drop. That doesn't sound like a bad thing. At first, it wasn't. The couples reported feeling more complete than they ever had before. They described it as finding their other half, their true soulmate. But there was a price. Dr. Whitmore walked to a file cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, medical reports, and police documents. The shared consciousness began to consume them. They lost their individual identities. They couldn't function apart from each other. Some pairs were found dead in their homes, apparently having starved to death because they were too absorbed in their shared mental state to take care of their physical bodies. That's insane, David said. Why would anyone choose that? Because the connection feels more real than reality itself. The shared consciousness becomes addictive. More satisfying than any drug, more fulfilling than any relationship. They willingly let it consume them. The truth about the dreams Dr. Whitmore led them to another room, this one filled with scientific equipment that looked decades old. Monitors, recording devices, and what appeared to be some kind of brain scanning machinery. The dream library where you've been meeting, she said, is this house, specifically this room, but as it existed 30 years ago when I first began my research. You've been accessing psychic impressions left behind by previous subjects. Sarah stared at the equipment. You mean we've been dreaming about real people? Who were here before us? In a sense, yes. The connections between paired dreamers create what I call psychic echoes. Strong emotional experiences leave impressions in places, especially places where consciousness has been altered or enhanced. This house has absorbed decades of shared dream experiences. So we're not special, David said bitterly. We're just the latest victims in your experiment. Oh, you're quite special indeed, Dr. Whitmore said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You see, I didn't bring you here just to study you. I brought you here to use you. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Use? Us for what? Sarah asked. I'm 93 years old, Dr. Whitmore said matter-of-factly. I've spent my entire adult life studying shared consciousness, but I've never experienced it myself. I've only observed it in others. And observation, I've learned, has its limitations. She moved toward one of the machines, her fingers dancing, over switches and dials. The equipment in this room can amplify and redirect psychic connections. With the right subjects who already have a strong shared consciousness like yours, I can tap into that connection. Experience what you experience. Share in your joined awareness. You want to steal our connection, David realized. Steal is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as joining. The three of us, linked together in perfect understanding. I would finally know what it feels like to truly share consciousness with another person. The trap revealed Sarah back toward the door but found it had somehow closed behind them. The handle wouldn't turn. "The previous subjects," she said, "they didn't die from addiction to shared consciousness, did they? You killed them when you were done studying them." Dr. Whitmore's facade of grandmotherly warmth finally dropped completely. "The research required certain sacrifices. Science has always demanded sacrifice. But I've learned from my mistakes with the previous pairs. You, too, will survive the process. You'll just be sharing your unique gift with someone who can truly appreciate it." The machines around the room began to hum with increasing intensity. Lights blinked on panels, and screens displayed wave-like patterns that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Sarah's heartbeat. "The process is already beginning," Dr. Whitmore said. "Being in this house, in this room, has strengthened your connection beyond what you experienced in dreams. Can you feel it? The way your thoughts are beginning to blend together?" Sarah realized with horror that she could feel David's fear, could sense his thoughts as clearly as her own. And underneath that, she felt something else trying to push its way into their shared awareness. Something cold and hungry and decades old. "Don't let her in," David said, though Sarah heard his words as much in her mind as through her ears. "Whatever happens, don't let her into our connection." But resisting was becoming harder by the second. The psychic pressure building in the room was overwhelming, and Dr. Whitmore's consciousness pressed against theirs like a crowbar trying to pry open a locked door. "The choice. You have two options," Dr. Whitmore said, her voice now coming from everywhere at once, as if the house itself was speaking. "You can fight the process and likely die from the psychic trauma, or you can accept it and live forever as part of something greater than your individual selves." Sarah could feel her sense of self beginning to fray at the edges. David's memories were mixing with her own. His childhood, his fears, his dreams were becoming indistinguishable from hers. But beneath the terror, she realized something important. Their connection wasn't just being amplified by Dr. Whitmore's machines. It was being changed, twisted into something that served the old woman's purposes. "David," she said, though she wasn't sure if she spoke aloud or directly into his mind. "The connection we had in dreams was pure. It was ours. This isn't the same thing." "I know," he replied. "But how do we fight something that's using our own bond against us?" The answer came to them simultaneously, a shared realization that cut through the psychic noise filling the room. They had to sever their connection entirely. It was the only way to deny Dr. Whitmore what she wanted. But severing a 3-year psychic bond while under attack from external forces would be like performing surgery on themselves with a rusty knife. "If we do this," David's thought voice was barely a whisper, "we'll lose each other forever. No more shared dreams, no more connection. We'll go back to being strangers." "But we'll be alive," Sarah replied, "and we'll be ourselves." Around them, the machines screamed with increasing intensity as Dr. Whitmore realized what they were planning. "Don't be fools," she shouted. "What you're about to do will destroy something beautiful, something that most people spend their entire lives searching for." But Sarah and David had made their choice. Together, they began the process of tearing apart the very connection that had brought them together. The psychic pain was indescribable. It felt like ripping out part of their souls. But as their shared consciousness began to fracture, Dr. Whitmore's invasive presence started to weaken. "No!" the old woman screamed. "You don't understand what you're throwing away." The last thing Sarah remembered before everything went black was the sound of David's voice, already growing distant and unfamiliar, saying goodbye to the connection that had defined both their lives for 3 years. When she woke up, she was alone. Sarah opened her eyes to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. She was lying on a hospital bed, IV tubes attached to her arm, and the steady beep of monitors filled the silence. Her head felt hollow, like an echo chamber where something precious had been torn away. A nurse noticed she was awake and hurried over. "You're in Portland General Hospital," she explained. "You were found unconscious in your car on Highway 26. You've been here for 2 days. David, Sarah whispered, her throat raw. There was a man with me. David Martinez. The nurse checked her chart. You were alone when the state police found you. Your car was parked on the side of the road with the engine still running. Do you remember what happened? Sarah tried to piece together her memories, but they felt fragmented, like trying to remember a dream after waking. There had been a house, an old woman, machines, and David. But when she tried to focus on David's face, she found only empty space where his memory should be. I don't remember, she lied. The search after being discharged from the hospital, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something crucial was missing from her life. She found herself driving the streets of Portland at night, looking for something she couldn't name. Her apartment felt too quiet. Her routine felt incomplete. She discovered David's notebook in her car, wedged between the passenger seat and the door. The sketches inside showed a woman who looked exactly like her, but she had no memory of the man who had drawn them. The handwriting was familiar, though, like a song she couldn't quite remember. At the bottom of the last page, she found an address written in different ink, as if it had been added recently. It was an apartment building downtown, only 20 minutes from her own place. Without fully understanding why, Sarah drove to the address. The empty space. David had been living with the same hollow feeling for a week since waking up in a downtown Portland emergency room. The doctors said he had been found collapsed on a street corner, dehydrated and confused, with no memory of how he had gotten there. He knew something important had been taken from him, but he couldn't identify what. There were gaps in his memory, spaces where significant experiences should have been. And every night, he found himself staring out his apartment window, as if waiting for someone who would never come. He had been sketching obsessively since returning home, drawing the same woman's face over and over. He didn't know who she was, but her features were burned into his mind with perfect clarity. Sometimes he would catch himself leaving his apartment at night, walking the streets without purpose, searching for something he couldn't name. On Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after waking up in the hospital, David heard a knock at his door. The recognition. When David opened the door, he saw a woman with long black hair and kind eyes, holding a leather notebook in her hands. The moment their eyes met, both of them felt a jolt of recognition that bypassed memory and went straight to something deeper. You drew me, Sarah said, holding up the notebook. You're real, David whispered. They stared at each other for a long moment, both feeling like they were looking at someone from a half-remembered dream. There was familiarity there, but also distance. Like recognizing someone you knew as a child, but couldn't quite place. I think we knew each other, Sarah said. I found your notebook in my car, but I can't remember how it got there. I can't remember you at all, but seeing you feels like coming home. David stepped aside to let her into his apartment. On his coffee table were dozens of sketches, all of Sarah's face, all drawn in the past week. I've been drawing you every day since I woke up in the hospital, he said. I don't know why. I don't remember meeting you, but I know your face better than my own. The fragments, they spent the evening comparing their fragmented memories. Both had gaps in their recollection. Both had been found alone and disoriented exactly 1 week ago. Both had been left with the overwhelming sense that something important had been torn away from them. I keep having this feeling that we used to talk, Sarah said, sitting on David's couch with his sketches spread between them. Long conversations about books and life and dreams, but I can't remember a single word we actually said to each other. I dream about a library, David admitted. Old books, fireplace, comfortable chairs, and there's always someone sitting across from me, someone I'm having deep conversations with. But when I wake up, I can never remember who it was or what we talked about, Sarah's breath caught. I have the same dream, the same library, and I always wake up feeling like I've lost something precious. They looked at each other with growing wonder. Whatever had been taken from them, whatever memories had been stolen or suppressed, The emotional connection remained. The bond between them had been damaged, but not destroyed. The choice to begin again. Maybe forgetting was a blessing, Sarah said as they walked through downtown Portland later that evening. Maybe whatever happened to us was something we needed to escape from. But what if forgetting means we lost something beautiful? David replied. What if we had something most people never find, and now it's gone forever? They stopped walking and faced each other under a streetlight. The rain had started again, just like the night they couldn't remember meeting. We could try to recover our memories, Sarah said. Investigate what happened to us. Try to piece together the missing week. Or, David said quietly, we could start over. Get to know each other again. But this time in the real world. No dreams, no mysteries, just two people who feel inexplicably drawn to each other. Sarah considered this. The idea of investigating their lost memories filled her with inexplicable dread, as if her subconscious was warning her away from something dangerous. But the idea of getting to know David fresh, of building something new with him, felt right. I'd like that, she said. Starting over. So would I. The new beginning. 6 months later, Sarah and David were inseparable. They had moved in together. After 3 months of dating, drawn together by a connection they couldn't fully explain, but didn't question. Their relationship felt both brand new and ancient, like they were rediscovering something they had always known. David had taken a job at a local bookstore. Sarah had started driving day shifts instead of nights, finding that she no longer felt the compulsion to roam the city after dark. They spent their evenings reading together, often in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing passages that struck them as particularly meaningful. Sometimes they would catch each other staring, as if trying to remember something just out of reach. But instead of dwelling on the gaps in their memory, they focused on building new experiences together. Do you ever wonder what we forgot? Sarah asked one evening as they lay in bed, rain pattering against the windows. Sometimes, David admitted. But then I think about what we have now, and I can't imagine wanting anything different. He was right. What they had built together felt complete in a way that their individual lives never had. They complemented each other perfectly, finishing each other's thoughts, sharing the same obscure interests, moving through their daily routines with an almost telepathic understanding of each other's needs. The final truth, what Sarah and David never learned, was that their sacrifice in Dr. Whitmore's house had been both successful and incomplete. They had severed their supernatural connection, denying the old woman what she wanted and escaping with their lives. But severing a psychic bond that deep had required them to forget not just their shared dreams, but all memories of each other. Dr. Whitmore's house stood empty now, the old woman having disappeared the night they escaped. Some said she had died from the psychic backlash when their connection was severed. Others claimed she had simply vanished, taking her research and her machines to torment other pairs elsewhere. But the bond between Sarah and David, though damaged, had not been completely destroyed. Their souls recognized each other even when their minds could not. The love that had grown through 3 years of shared dreams had found a way to survive even the forced amputation of memory. They had lost their supernatural connection, but they had gained something perhaps more valuable, the chance to choose each other freely, without the influence of forces beyond their understanding. Epilogue. The library. 2 years after their first conscious meeting, Sarah and David bought a house together. It was a modest Victorian in the hills outside Portland, chosen because it felt like home the moment they saw it. While cleaning out the previous owner's belongings, they discovered a room that had been used as a library. Tall bookshelves, comfortable chairs, and a fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. "This room feels familiar," Sarah said, running her fingers along the spines of the abandoned books. Like we've been here before, David agreed. They restored the library together, filling it with their own books, adding cushions to the chairs, getting the fireplace working again. It became their favorite room in the house, the place where they spent their evenings reading and talking, and simply being together. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the fire was crackling and the rain was falling outside, they would look at each other across the small table between their chairs and feel an echo of something deeper, something that whispered of shared dreams and impossible connections, and a love that had survived even the loss of its own memory. But they never spoke of these moments. Instead, they would reach across the table and take each other's hand, grateful for the love they had built together in the waking world, unaware that they were living in the same library where their souls had first learned to dance together in dreams. Some connections, it seems, are stronger than memory. Some loves are deeper than consciousness itself. And in a small library in the hills outside Portland, two people who had forgotten how to dream together were learning how to live together instead, which perhaps was the more beautiful miracle after all.